Hello there my Jedi and Sith friends, my Mandalorians, my Megalorians, and I think I see a Rodian. Please take a seat and welcome to another Star Wars video. It is I coming at you once again, your friend and your favourite galactic hostess, Star Wars Meg. So today is actually part 2 of a video which I posted just a few days ago where I broke down some deleted scene ideas and concepts from the Art of Andor book. By popular demand, I decided to make a follow-up. There's just so much juicy material in there. So just to catch you up to speed, Andor was originally a very different show. When it was handed to Jared Bush around 2018, he wanted to make a series in the direct spiritual line of Rogue One. And while it's true that both his and Tony Gilroy's versions are prequels to the 2016 film, based on the very brief bit of info that we got, Jared's version wasn't going to take as much risk, but I will confess it was a fascinating premise, based on an Imperial spy who infiltrated several rebel bases. Cassian is accused of being said spy, and so he goes on his own mission to find the real culprit. But today, my friends, we have some more reveals, and the first is that we now know the series wasn't always called Star Wars Andor. In fact, the earliest title was Star Wars Alliance. It was titled as such for pretty obvious reasons. One of the biggest aims of this series was to show us the foundations of the Rebel Alliance, the alliance to restore the Republic. And while I personally think this title is quite cool, it's also very generic. That being said, Star Wars Alliance is still better than another iteration Lucasfilm was messing around with. They almost went with Star Wars Andor 5, again, trying to copy the militant designation style of Rogue One. Andor 5 is a bit more convoluted and doesn't have the same ring to it. So moving on to our next reveals, and I should just say my friends, from here on out we're not going to focus so much on the pre-Tony Gilroy version of the show, we're just going to focus on deleted scenes and deleted concepts from the 2 seasons that we got. Just a bit of a disclaimer. Let's start with some really fun concepts for Luthen Rael, ones which never made it to screen. Some of them are pretty tame, while others, you couldn't imagine Stellan Skarsgård dressing like this in live action. But then again, he suits anything. The guy was literally in Mamma Mia for goodness sake. But as promised, we have to talk about some concepts which are so crazy you probably wouldn't believe them until you saw them yourself. Wilmon Paak. There are some really cool designs that were never used. One of him as a pilot, keeping in line with the Rogue One aesthetic, but then there's one that looks nothing like the actor who plays him. This doesn't look like Mohammed Ben Anor, but it does look like Manny Jacinto. Chimera, aka the stranger from the Acolyte. Do you think there's a chance he auditioned for Andor before the Acolyte was even a thing? And was he a serious consideration? It's not as far-fetched as you think, because before Adria Arjona was given the role of Bix Colleen, she auditioned for another Star Wars project. We don't know which one. There was a bit of speculation a couple of years back that she originally auditioned to play Rey in The Force Awakens, whereas others say she was considered to play the role of Jyn Erso. It's very possible Lucasfilm calls back actors who auditioned for a role that they didn't get, and uses them in later projects. So for all we know, there is a chance that Manny auditioned for Andor. Maybe he was a finalist, that's why we have some concept art of him as Wilmon, but in the end they didn't go for him. So now my friends, we move on to Yavin and the Maya Pei Rebels. This is honestly one of the most underrated arcs from the 2nd season. It's often overlooked, but I did notice something very interesting in the concept art. We see a member of the group who bears a striking resemblance to Hunter from the Bad Batch. Now let's be honest, this is probably just a coincidence, but I don't know if you remember, there was a wild rumour a couple of years ago that stated Andor Season 2 has some kind of connection to the Bad Batch. I covered it, and I told you to take it with a huge pinch of salt. But I have to wonder if the originator of that scoop just saw this concept art and drew their own conclusions. They saw the resemblance to Hunter in not just one but 2 of these guys, and assumed that maybe there was some unlikely connection to the Bad Batch. I can see why there was a bit of confusion. I wonder if there was some inspiration in the design. By this point, the Bad Batch, obviously the male members not Omega, have retired on Pabu. But just like the Manny thing, it's interesting food for thought. But at the same time, I do see a bit of Native American indigenous inspiration here, and Hunter himself was created as an amalgamation of lots of different influences. But it's just something that came to mind. And on the subject of the Maya Pei Rebels, the book says this: a ragtag mixture of people from different planets and cultures, which represent the chaos, the anarchy of early groups of rebels, idiosyncratic, homemade uniforms, and what was so amazing for us as Star Wars fans about this arc was the final reveal that this jungle planet was actually the moon of Yavin 4, which of course has huge connections to Rogue One and A New Hope. But originally that wasn't in the cards. According to Tony Gilroy, they were just gonna make it a random jungle planet, but then they realized they had the opportunity to make an insane connection, and so they went to Pablo Hidalgo and they asked him if it aligns with Canon. And Pablo responded that because in Canon there isn't too much exploration of Yavin at this point, it fits. And then Tony said, okay great, we're in Yavin. That will be a viral Twitter moment. Of course in Legends, Yavin 4 has an extensive history, notably one that connects to Exar Kun, who by the way my friends, is now canon. Did you know that the base of Dryden Voss's desk is made with an obsidian slab that was taken from the Sith Temple of Exar Kun? But moving on my friends, we have to talk about the return of Krennic. Because of Andor's connection to Rogue One, because of the importance of Project Stardust, and the rebels finding out about the Death Star plans, Krennic was a no-brainer for this show. And you wouldn't believe one of the earliest concepts. He looks so different. This is in the chapter about the Molfine Divide, where of course Krennic held a meeting about the invasion of Wilmon. And just to demonstrate the level of detail in this show, something which goes unnoticed, but took a ridiculous amount of time to create, is the Imperial buffet in the background. Here we have a close-up of some of the foods that the Imperials ate, and a couple of these are recycled from Solo: A Star Wars Story in 2018. Another massive reveal which put a huge smile on my face was finding out that the Rebel emblem at the top of the Andor logo was inspired by Sabine's graffiti in Star Wars Rebels. Something else that went under the radar is the kitchen in Cyril's mum's apartment was based on Ralph McQuarrie's Wookiee kitchen in the Star Wars Holiday Special. That is a very deep cut, and in recent years they've been doing a lot with the Holiday Special. In Skeleton Crew, in some of the comics, Life Day is a big thing in canon once again, so even though it's arguably one of the most controversial Star Wars films ever made, it's still a movie with a huge legacy. Something else which no one really knew until this book is that the Shoretroopers on Niamos use a variation of the E11 blaster pistol, the classic weapon used by stormtroopers. And speaking of Niamos, the prison transport is a variant of the Imperial dropship from the Mandalorian Season 2. But now my friends, we have to talk about something which I've brought up once in the past, and that is the deleted horror episode that was going to be the self-contained introduction of K2SO. His initial introduction was almost so much more brutal and gruesome. This was Dan Gilroy's pitch for Season 2 Episode 9. After the massacre on Gorman, instead of Andor electively taking a KX droid himself, one of them who's not been deactivated sneaks on board and starts brutally killing several rebels. And here is the new quote: "We were gonna have an almost alien-esque Predator combo in space, which would have been really cool, but it was a whole other expense. It always stood very large and looming outside the budget. It was just too great a diversion. Suddenly we just left Gorman on some random mission on a ship. They get boarded and K2 tears it up, the crew and the ship. And honestly guys, I think it was the right call to scrap this. I love the way things played out, not just because K2 becomes more likable, but because we get that very intense moment of reflection. It's a breather for us as the audience, and it also puts into perspective the gravity of what's just taken place." And finally my dear friends, something which really shocked me in this book is just how many aliens there were in the show. Most of them are in the background so you never really notice them, but a lot of thoughts went into not making this show too human-centric. As I like to joke, a good portion of reading this book is playing a game of who the frick is that? But those are just some more new reveals from the book guys. What do you think? Do you want even more videos like this? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this one, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, check out my last video, and may the Force be with you, always.